her seeming glorification of Vladimir Putin. It is hard to understand, coming from the country that defeated the Soviet Union in the Cold War, that we would put a woman in charge of our entire intelligence community who has shown over and over repeated interest in Vladimir Putin, taking his side of the argument, wondering what he's done right and our intelligence community has done wrong.
You put it that way. That was Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin. She's a former CIA agent, laying out and articulating the case against Tulsi Gabbard, who Russian state media describes as, quote, their girl to be the American director of national intelligence. Of course, she came up short. The United States Senate, controlled by Republicans, confirmed Tulsi Gabbard to lead those 18 different intelligence agencies responsible for thwarting threats to Americans here and abroad. She was sworn in a few moments ago. Gabbard was confirmed by a vote of 52 to 48, with all 47 Democrats, as well as Mitch McConnell, voting against her. A brutal bit of irony for the man who used to control the Republican Party, now finding himself casting what is basically an ineffective dissent to oppose a nominee who Russia is cheering for. Within an hour of Gabbard's confirmation, Donald Trump announced that he and Vladimir Putin would immediately begin negotiations to end the war in Ukraine. We're back with Claire and David. Claire, we need more Claire.
Yeah, I can't tell you how disappointed I am in my former Republican colleagues, who many of whom know better. And you know, I think there's a certain irony that I would quote Mitch McConnell today. Mitch McConnell said, "It's her judgment." Do you really want somebody in charge of this really sensitive and important part of protecting our national security, someone who's had such poor judgment in the past? I mean, all these people claim they've, whether it's RFK saying now he's okay with vaccines, or whether it's Kash Patel, trying to convince people that he hasn't said that he wants to tear down the FBI building and make it a museum. Forget all these people like trying to disavow who they were. This shows her lack of judgment. And Lisa Murkowski knows that. Susan Collins knows that. Todd Young knows that. Bill Cassidy knows that. These guys, they all know it. And they wouldn't vote for her no matter what if she was nominated for this by a Democrat. And the reason she was a Democrat is because a lot of her views of the world were really far left. So, these guys have lost their minds. They've just lost their minds. I don't know what else to say.
David?
In a bubble, you like to think Mitch McConnell's having a John McCain moment, but Mitch McConnell always seems to disappoint, and John McCain rarely did. I think we can't overlook the real significant national security geopolitical story that happened this morning. And for much as we see the Trump administration as chaos, today was clearly so well coordinated. Tulsi Gabbard is confirmed, while Pete Hegseth is addressing NATO, saying Ukraine has to give up their sovereign territory to Russia, while Donald Trump's on the phone with Vladimir Putin, engaging in a prisoner swap, but also saying we're going to reach some type of peace agreement. And by the way...
And have two summits.
Yeah, and have two summits. We're going to have state visits by Putin and Trump. Today was the day, not surprising, right? We knew all this was happening. Right. This is part of where MAGA is. But boy, a pivot in American foreign policy. And I think in Mitch McConnell's vote, he sees that. To Claire's point, all these other senators see it as well. They just collapsed and fell in line. But in terms of our own national security and in terms of pivoting America's posture on the world stage, today was a heavy, heavy day just a few weeks into the Trump administration.
Well, let me ask both of you. I hear what you're saying, Claire. I'm about 4 years beyond being able to be disappointed by the Republicans, because I think this is who they've become. Let me ask you, I think most of them know better. There are a couple who maybe seem to not, but the vast majority of them know better. So they decided to do this. Why?
Because Donald Trump won in a more convincing fashion than most people anticipated. Because he won in spite of all the things he has done and shown the American people about his character and integrity. Because their party, the base of their party, is enthralled with this man. Some of the people I mentioned have elections coming up in states that they could easily be defeated in a primary by a pro-MAGA Republican. I'm sure that part of Susan Collins' calculation is she became convinced that Tulsi Gabbard was not going to do some things she liked. And she knows that if a MAGA Republican got nominated in Maine and beat her in a primary, that they would be defeated in the general, because that's a state that Kamala Harris won and Joe Biden won. And it's a state that Susan Collins has held on to because she has been thoughtful and moderate in many instances, not all, but in many instances. So I think it's this primary coming up for many of them, and the pressure they feel that their party has been basically the party they knew has disappeared in terms of issues like how we treat our enemies like Russia. That is no longer, I mean, whether it's free trade or hawkish views on foreign defense, or standing up for the rule of law, the Republican Party is not who the Republican Party used to be. And I think they're all searching for a home and are uncomfortable in the home they find themselves in.
So politics, which is what I thought, and that's just pathetic. It's like shining your shoes on the deck of the Titanic. Susan Collins wants to make sure her, heels don't get stubbed as she's going down underwater. It's absolutely, I thought that was the reason. I wasn't sure, but that's sick. They're there for 6 years so that every now and again they do the right thing for the country. That's I'm sure you're correct, but that's a tragedy. Hi there, everybody. It's 4 o'clock in New York. In the second Trump administration, telling the truth can get you fired. Brand new reporting from the Washington Post, breaking this afternoon, reveals that the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has fired the #1 and #2 officials at the National Intelligence Council, weeks after the council published an assessment that all but demolished Team Trump's legal rationale for mass deportations. From that report, quote, Gabbard removed Michael Collins, the acting chair of the National Intelligence Council, as well as his deputy, Maria Langdon-Rykoff. That's according to a spokesperson for Gabbard's office. The firings took place 1 week after the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a partially declassified intelligence assessment dated April 7th and produced by the National Intelligence Council. That assessment found that the Venezuelan government is most likely not directing the activities of the gang known as Tren de Aragua or facilitating its operations in the U.S. A reminder, this assessment said this, quote, while Venezuela's permissive environment enables TDA, Tren de Aragua, to operate, the Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the U.S. Statements like that are very inconvenient for the Trump administration. In invoking the Alien Enemies Act on March 15th, the Trump administration said in an executive order this, quote, TDA is undertaking hostile actions and conducting irregular warfare against the territory of the U.S., both directly and at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. That was the entire justification for using the Alien Enemies Act in the first place. The Alien Enemies Act was used only 3 times in American history, and the Trump administration is using it to deport migrants without any semblance of due process being given to them and then sending them to a notorious prison in El Salvador. With their justification for using the AEA, Alien Enemies Act, blown to smithereens by their own government, the Trump administration, instead of backing down on the deportations, has instead started a crackdown on the fact finders and the truth tellers in their own intelligence community. The New York Times reported last week that in the wake of its own reporting on an initial assessment back in February, quote, the Justice Department opened a criminal investigation and portrayed the reporting as misleading and harmful. The administration doubled down a month later after similar coverage in the Washington Post, citing the disclosures in both articles as a reason to relax limits on leak investigations. Now, the firing of the #1 and #2 officials at the National Intelligence Council sends an unmistakable message. The ranking member of the House Intel Committee, Congressman Jim Himes, tells the Washington Post this, quote, absent evidence to justify the firings, the workforce can only conclude that their jobs are contingent on producing analysis that is aligned with the president's agenda, rather than truthful and apolitical, end quote. It's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Washington Post national investigative reporter Carol Leonnig is here. Also joining us is former CIA director, now MSNBC senior national security analyst John Brennan. Director Brennan, I'm actually going to start with you because I believe you know these officials. Let me just tell our viewers a little bit about the folks who have been fired, purged from the federal government. Collins has spent 3 decades in the intelligence community, has served as chief of staff for the CIA's deputy director, starting his career as an analyst focused on East Asia. Langen Rykhoff has also served more than 30 years, has more than 30 years experience in the intelligence community, including as an expert on the Middle East. The ODNI previously listed her as an exceptional analyst. She also previously served as director of the Strategic Futures Group at the National Intelligence Council. Seasoned, apolitical, proven, trusted intelligence officials fired today by Tulsi Gabbard. Director Brennan.
Yeah, this whole thing just makes me livid. It's appalling and outrageous and demonstrates why Tulsi Gabbard never should have been confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. Michael Collins and Marie Langen Rykhoff are 2 of the most experienced, accomplished, and talented analysts in the entire U.S. intelligence community. With over 60 years of combined experience, they have worked for successive administrations since the 1990s. They have demonstrated time and time again their capabilities, their competence, their integrity, and they have served as role models for a generation of intelligence officers inside of CIA. They're CIA officers by background and by training. And this is going to have real reverberations within the workforce because, as Congressman Himes pointed out, it's clearly a signal to tell analysts throughout the intelligence community, you tell the truth, you provide objective analysis as you're supposed to be doing, you are running the risk of getting fired. And Michael and Maria are really the quintessential analysts that you want to have providing insight and information and analysis to policymakers so they make the right decisions for U.S. policymakers. But this is a very tangible example of such dangerous and insidious corruption within the Trump administration. They are now manipulating the instruments of government that are used to keep this country safe. And again, the sacking of these 2 individuals, the very competent and capable officers who have been revered by a generation of intelligence analysts within the agency and across the community because of their accomplishments. This again sends a very clear and chilling signal to others that this is a new day. And if you're going to carry out your responsibilities professionally, with competence and with integrity, you are going to be in the crosshairs of this administration. Absolutely appalling.
Director Brennan, I wonder if you can pull the curtain back a little bit for me on the conversations happening among former intelligence officials, because I know in the transition from my own reporting that there was grave concern about the folks that had been anywhere near any collection or analysis around Putin and Russia going back to the first Trump term and through the Biden years. But what these firings exhibit is that if the intelligence community isn't complicit in manufacturing rationales for invoking the Alien Enemies Act, which is something that is now snarled up in the courts, and the intelligence products are likely to be used as evidence to fight the invoking of the Alien Enemies Act. I mean, facts are facts. And where the Trump administration is running into the wall of facts really isn't in Congress, where the Republicans don't seem to care. It isn't among their base, which so far hasn't rejected Donald Trump. And it isn't anywhere that we can see other than when they are in court. And I wonder what it portends that 2 senior intelligence officials have been fired because the intelligence product didn't support a false rationale for invoking the Alien Enemies Act.
It portends real danger. intelligence professionals, both those currently serving and those who served and are retired, were very concerned about the selections for individuals at the top of the intelligence community and across the government. But we had great confidence that the intelligence professionals would fulfill their responsibilities to make sure that they told truth to power. But now with this action, it demonstrates that those at the top of the intelligence community can terminate individuals. We have already seen it at CIA in terms of the termination of individuals who are working on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Even though they may have been reassigned to other positions, they are being terminated. They are being, condemned. And so it shows that people like Tulsi Gabbard, John Ratcliffe, and others can really take actions that's going to undermine the capabilities and the integrity of that intelligence community. And so this is something that I think we're all very worried about. And it also, again, I think it reflects the sense that's coming from the White House that people have to get in line, that there's a sense that there needs to be fealty to Donald Trump. And if you're not going to genuflect at his altar, you're going to see the door. And when it starts hitting the intelligence community, the law enforcement community, the diplomatic community, and the U.S. military, I think we're really in for a very, very dangerous time.
Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Lisa Cook had done absolutely nothing wrong. Isn't it a little preposterous to say that the President of the United States, the elected President of the United States, working, of course, in concert with Congress, doesn't have the ability to make these determinations? Who makes the decisions about this country? Is it those the American people elect, or is it unelected bureaucrats? And I feel very strongly that the President of the United States is much better able to make these determinations.
A lot of things up in that. One, working, of course, in concert with Congress, which Donald Trump is not doing when it comes to Lisa Cook. But I also want to show our viewers the major countries without an independent central bank, which it seems that the president wants us to follow: China, Iran, Cuba, Turkey, Venezuela, and Argentina. When you think about how earth-shattering it would be for someone like Lisa Cook, for any of these governors on the Fed, to be taken out by the president off of their jobs, the effect of that country, what does it say about not just the economy, because that's what we focus on, but the rule of law and how much power the presidency has?
The vice president, who's a Yale-educated lawyer, really needs a basic education in constitutional law and how the Constitution works. Because when he says the president has this power, he's absolutely wrong. This is a congressional power. Congress has passed laws that very clearly maintain the board as something that's independent. Commissioners, governors are put in place for 15-year terms, and that's deliberately meant to avoid the whims of the political cycle. So look, even though the president can remove a governor, he has to do it for cause. And although that's been poorly defined, because this has never happened, not a single time in the history of our country, cause certainly at a minimum would mean some sort of nonfeasance or malfeasance, something that impacts the governor's performance in the position that they hold. And these allegations, and it's important to say that what's been leveled at Cook are simply allegations. They haven't been proven. Charges haven't even been brought. But they predate her service on the board. You know, I know a lot of people have filled out mortgage applications and indicated that the mortgage is for their primary residence, because what your primary residence is can shift over time. I'll leave that sort of a defense in Norm's very capable hands. But this sort of speculative approach to removing someone from a board that is meant to be independent, to preserve not just, the nation, but yours and mine in a very individual way, our financial security, this is wrong-headed, and Vance knows better than to defend it in this way.
And I want to stay on that J.D. Vance interview with USA Today. He also commented on the National Guard deployment, sort of mocking Democrats and their reaction to what's going on. He said that we don't want to go in where we're unwelcome, that there's a political reason. He went on to say, to again mock Democrats who were saying this is a dictatorship, Trump is a fascist, blah, 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 blah. We don't want people to stand up before a press conference, accuse the president of being a fascist, accuse the National Guard of being some part of dictatorial coup when they're in private. They're actually thanking law enforcement. Norm, can you explain in very simple terms, without using these trigger words, apparently, authoritarianism, fascism, dictatorships,
and blah, 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 blah,
why Americans need to be concerned about what's going on?
Jackie, we know from looking at other countries around the world that when the military, this goes all the way back to the Roman Republic and the Rubicon, that the military had to stay out of Rome, because when the power of our military, not our law enforcement, not our police, their job is domestic law enforcement, but when the power of the military can be turned on average folks, that is a danger. That is when you slip over from democracy to dictatorship. And as we look out the windows of the studio, the National Guard is needlessly deployed around Washington, D.C. In California, what ICE was doing, the paramilitary activities were enjoined. A TRO was entered by a court, illegal. And so the American people don't like it. I saw a poll on, they don't want troops in Washington, D.C. by an overwhelming majority 56%. Because of the danger to our democracy. So everybody watching should know those same troops that Donald Trump is controlling belong protecting us abroad, not here in our cities. That is a hallmark. He's saying it in his own words. He wants to be a dictator. He said even before he came to office, I want to be a dictator on day one. We heard the sound over and over again, dictator, dictator, dictator. This is one of the hallmarks. It should not be allowed. Fortunately, the courts are pushing back.
Miles, bringing you in here because there was another headline this week that is, frankly, pretty stunning. So tensions are rising between Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and the CIA chief because she disclosed an undercover officer's name, according to NBC. And Gabbard and her office failed to properly coordinate the move with the CIA before revoking the security clearances of the 37 current and former officials. It appeared that Gabbard and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence were unaware of the CIA employees' covert mission.
They're that good.
How big of a deal is this? I mean, what's your response to this?
Well, this is a huge deal. And I can tell you, there are people on that list that Norm knows and that I know and that I suspect Joyce knows that are extraordinary American patriots. I mean, top intelligence officials who've done things to save American lives, and not just hyperbolically or symbolically, actually. Americans who would have otherwise been dead were it not for the 37 people on those lists. So that list is arbitrary, that list is punitive, and that list apparently included people who were still undercover. This is a very big deal because once an intelligence officer's cover is blown, that's it. They don't go back in, they don't get to go back and deploy overseas, but it's more significant than that because that can compromise ongoing intelligence operations and activities. Why? Because that person possibly was engaging in those intelligence collection activities under their pseudonym, under their fake name. And once it's known that that person is actually an intelligence operative, that can lead foreign governments to go unravel real-time operations. That puts sources in danger. Again, that puts American lives in danger. This is like a core thing that the Director of National Intelligence shouldn't screw up. And clearly she screwed up. Now, I get that the CIA is saying, you know, we are upset about this. But look, I'm not going to let John Ratcliffe and the CIA off either, because they have been perfectly willing to come out and politicize intelligence in recent weeks on things like Russia and rewrite the past and carry the president's water in ways that also do damage to intelligence collection, and the United States intelligence community workforce. And so I think what we're seeing with both of those individuals in the IC is what we expected would happen if you put partisan henchmen into those jobs, is you start to put the American people in danger, and eventually the Oval Office becomes an echo chamber because they are only telling Donald Trump what he wants to hear. So it very much alarms me that they're hollowing out the spy service, but also that they're turning it into a partisan lever for the president.
Let's get right to our MS Now team. Josh Einiger on the ground in Fulton County. Also with us, political contributor Greg Bluestein of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, who was at the Fulton County facility while the FBI was on scene. And also joining us, national security analyst and former FBI special agent Michael Feinberg. Josh, the county commissioner says the FBI took pallets of ballots. So what exactly did the FBI take? Because this was an extremely broad search warrant.
It was a very broad search warrant, Anna, and it really had to do with all available ballots from the 2020 election. Notably, they did not leave an inventory list, which is typically the case. So exactly what was taken has not been made public just yet, but pallets of ballots, as you say, according to that source. We are waiting for county officials, as you say, any minute now to address what happened here, and perhaps we'll get more information from them. But let's take a step back for a second. These ballots were only here because of what has been described by a source here in Fulton County this morning as a gadfly lawsuit that was underway and has been underway now for years from someone who still believes in the now discredited theories of election fraud here in Fulton County in 2020. A judge had ordered these ballots, which ordinarily under statute would have been destroyed after 22 months, be held in the building behind me. And so that was why they were here in the first place. And then yesterday, of course, a U.S. attorney in Missouri filed a search warrant. The FBI came here and executed that warrant to take all that material, and they were here for hours taking those pallets away. A little while ago, we spoke with Jeff Duncan, who was the Republican lieutenant governor here in Georgia back in 2020. He's now a Democrat and running for governor. Here's his take on what happened here last night.
There's no fact pattern that shows that this is about facts throughout the entire almost 6 years now. This is about a political vengeance. This is about trying to prove a narrative that's not true. And quite honestly, I mean, they should have moved on. This isn't about what's good for the country. This is about what's doing good for Donald Trump.
A lot of fears among Fulton County Democrats this morning that all of this is an attempt to sow seeds of discontent and seeds of really make people question future election results here in 2026 and in 2028. Of course, we are waiting, as you point out, Anna, for Fulton County officials, the county the head of the Board of Elections here to address the press just in the next couple of minutes about perhaps more information about what was taken yesterday. Anna.
Josh Einiger, thank you for that. Keep us posted as you get more information. And of course, we'll be standing by for that press conference with the county officials. Michael, one of the people who's going to be given this briefing is Fulton County Commission Chair Rob Pitts. And about these ballots that were taken, he says, we don't know where they're being taken. We don't know what's going to happen to them. Again, pallets of ballots. How do we make sure these ballots aren't altered?
So normally there is a very strict chain of custody when the FBI seizes items pursuant to a search warrant. And that chain of custody needs to be offered up at court to defense counsel before the evidence is used. And that should list everybody who at any point had the evidence. Now, this is really going to get interesting, and I don't want to jump on something you're probably going to cover in a minute, but there was a pretty notable non-law enforcement personnel person there who was alone with evidence for some time, it appears, based on a photograph we've seen. And I don't know what's going to happen if they try and call her to testify, because she, by dint of her position, should have nothing to do with law enforcement operations whatsoever.
You're talking about Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence who showed up on scene?
Yes, and based on that photo, at one point she was in a truck with box loads of what are apparently ballots, which means if she was alone, she is going to need to be on the chain of custody for those ballots and explain to defense counsel why she was with them and what she was doing. And if there was a special agent in there with her, that special agent is going to be on the chain of custody and is probably going to get asked by defense counsel why on earth somebody was allowed to be with that evidence who is not a member of the FBI nor on the chain of custody.
So, Michael, let me interrupt you for just a second, and I'll ask you to continue, but we just literally got some information about why Tulsi Gabbard was there. This is per a Trump administration official. Director Gabbard has a pivotal role in election security and protecting the integrity of our elections against interference, including operations targeting voting systems, databases, and election infrastructure. She has and will continue to take action on President Trump's directive to secure our elections and work with our interagency partners to do so. What do you make of that explanation?
It doesn't pass the laugh test for anybody who's actually worked in this world. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, this was collection of evidence. There is nothing there that cannot be reported to Tulsi Gabbard once they have processed it, analyzed it, and finished doing whatever they were doing on site. Again, it is unheard of for non-law enforcement personnel to take place in the execution of a search warrant. Secondly, this is a criminal investigation. It is looking at past conduct. Even if we believed that Tulsi Gabbard should be involved in law enforcement actions relating to the security of our elections, that is only something that she would be doing if there was something happening presently or in the future. It is inexplicable that there was why she was there. There is literally no legitimate reason that she should have been on site.
So, Greg, there's now the DOJ, the DNI, the FBI, all apparently involved in this. It's a massive escalation in the president's persistent and disproven election fraud claims. How did we get here? And I know you were on scene. What stood out to you?
Yeah, how we got here is, frankly, local officials have been expecting this, dreading this for a year now. There were rumors that this could be happening a year ago, and when President Trump spoke at Davos saying essentially that some people could soon be punished for their roles in the 2020 elections, Fulton County officials went into sort of hyper overdrive, being vigilant about this potential possibility. They were still surprised when it happened so soon, happened yesterday. We reached out to local officials as it was happening who said, we don't know what's going on. We have no idea what they're taking, what they're looking for. There was some confusion about the warrant that needed to be broadened after it was filed incorrectly at first. But what we have now are a number of mysteries, including the Tulsi Gabbard question, which we just tackled, but also what happens next. And a lot of local officials are worried that this will end up kind of triggering a Georgia law that passed after the 2020 election that could allow the state to have more authority in Fulton County elections. Fulton County is Georgia's most populous county. It's also one of the bluest counties in Georgia. It has had a history of election issues for decades of, slow reporting of results, those sort of things. But local officials have really worked to revamp the system. And even state officials a few years ago said, you know what, they've cleaned up their act. And now there's a possibility, a really distinct possibility, that the state could now take more control over Fulton County elections ahead of the midterm.
So, Michael, I'm thinking that a judge had to sign off on the search warrants, right? Does that give this investigation any more legitimacy?
Yes and no. Obviously, the fact that the government presented a theory of criminal action and a plan to an independent judge who is not part of the executive branch, obviously, should give us a little comfort. What worries me is that there is something within Fourth Amendment jurisprudence called the plain view doctrine, which means that if you are searching for evidence of crime X, but inadvertently in the course of that, without trying, come across evidence of crime Y, you're allowed to use that evidence for crime Y's investigation and prosecution. Normally, you would not be able to take evidence for something unrelated to the specific search warrant. And I really do worry that this administration, which has repeatedly shown disdain for the separation of criminal investigations from political policies, used a small legitimate misdemeanor charge, which is what is on the warrant, as an effort to get into what is essentially an archival facility for 2020 ballots. And then, in going meticulously through them, pursuant to that misdemeanor investigation, is going to say, oh, while we were there, we found all this other stuff. And they're going to have it now, and they're going to use it or alter it to forward paranoid conspiracies about what happened in Georgia in 2020.
On Sunday, the leader of the largest Christian denomination in the world said this: on behalf of the Christians of the Middle East and all men and women of goodwill, I appeal to those responsible for this conflict: cease the fire, reopen paths of dialogue. Violence can never lead to the justice, stability, and peace that people are waiting for. And today, the leader of no one, who has the legal title of Secretary of Defense but fraudulently refers to himself as the Secretary of War, said this:
may Almighty God continue to bless our troops in this fight. And again, to the American people, please pray for them every day, on bended knee, with your family, in your schools, in your churches, in the name of Jesus Christ.
In the name of Jesus Christ means that the misguided fanatic, who is by far the most incompetent Secretary of Defense in history, does not want the prayers or good wishes or anything else from the 38% of Americans who are not Christian. Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense does not want one Jewish prayer said in support of Donald Trump's war, not one. He very obviously does not want a Muslim prayer spoken anywhere in the United States in support of Donald Trump's war, on bended knee or not. And he does not want the prayer of Christians who are not literally on their knees. I used to kneel down for most of the prayers that we did when I was an altar boy in Catholic elementary school, but the priests didn't. Catholic priests, who live an even more religious life than Pete Hegseth, do most of their public praying standing up, which is apparently unacceptable to the religiosity of Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth is the first Secretary of Defense in history who thinks he can define for Americans the proper way of praying, the proper way of praying for a war, on bended knee, in the name of Jesus Christ. There are some choices here. One is that Pete Hegseth doesn't mean any of it, not a single word. He wouldn't be the first fraudulently public religious person. It is possible that he uses excessive and false and invented religiosity to cover for a life prior to this of infidelity in his previous marriages that have led him to his third marriage and a pledge to stop what appeared to be his uncontrollable drinking so that he could be confirmed as Secretary of Defense. That's a possibility. If you're taking your religious direction from Pete Hegseth, you are lost. And we can only hope that the American military is not taking orders from Pete Hegseth. We can only hope that he is the fake figurehead at the Department of Defense, where the American military in harm's way are under the command of generals and admirals who ignore the rantings of Pete Hegseth and leave him to instruct the country on how to pray to win a war started by Donald Trump. Pete Hegseth doesn't want the prayers of the vice president's wife because she is not and never has been Christian. And Pete Hegseth doesn't want the prayers of two of the three officials who testified to the House Intelligence Committee today about the worldwide threat assessment because Donald Trump's FBI director and Donald Trump's director of national intelligence are not Christian. And so they will never join Pete Hegseth. to pray on bended knee in the name of Jesus Christ to win the war that they could not defend today. Tulsi Gabbard continued her remarkable two-day tour of congressional testimony in which, as Donald Trump's Director of National Intelligence, she has steadfastly refused to support Donald Trump's claim that Iran was an imminent threat to the United States and that Iran was 2 weeks away from hitting the United States of America with a nuclear weapon. The entire world knows that Donald Trump was lying when he said that. And so when Tulsi Gabbard is asked about Donald Trump's absurd lies about an imminent threat from Iran to the United States, she simply pretends that it is no longer the job of the Director of National Intelligence to assess or describe threats. And that could not be more insane when she's appearing in a hearing titled the Worldwide Threats Assessment Hearing. There are 2 of those hearings every year, 2 days in a row in the Senate and in the House. And this was day 2. And Tulsi Gabbard became the first Director of National Intelligence in history to claim it is not her job to actually make threat assessments. It is not her job to ever use the phrase imminent threat. She's just not allowed to use it. She's just not ever allowed to say those 2 words, according to her new, invented, lying description of her job.
Director Gabbard, last year you testified that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. Do you stand by that statement? Yes or no?
Context matters with that statement.
Yes or no?
Iran had all of the materials and capabilities to do so.
Mr. Chairman, I reclaim my time. It's an easy answer. You either stand by what you said last year or not.
It is a serious question that requires the totality of the information available.
Director Gabbard, I reclaim my time. I reclaim my time. When President Trump was asked about your testimony, he said you were wrong. Were you lying or not?
I stand by the intelligence community's complete assessment.
Director Ratcliffe, when it came to the director's testimony, she said that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon last spring in Congress. And so the Supreme Leader has not authorized the nuclear weapons program. Do you agree with what she said or not? Yes or no?
The director's right here. She can speak for herself.
Oh, so I thought this was an intelligence community briefing. Let's move on.
The weak fools at the top of Donald Trump's intelligence team. So there's the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the Director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, disgracing themselves in full public fear of saying out loud that there was no imminent threat. At the same time, they will not say there was an imminent threat. And that's after Tulsi Gabbard's deputy, Joe Kent, resigned in protest because he said in writing in a letter to Donald Trump there was no imminent threat of an attack from Iran. That's what Donald Trump wants them to say. He wants them to say that there was a threat. Donald Trump wants them to say that everything Donald Trump has said about this is correct and we agree with it. But they are boldly refusing to do that for Donald Trump in the middle of his war. They are refusing to agree with Donald Trump's claim that Iran was an imminent threat. Now, you can interpret congressional testimony, as I used to do professionally as the chief of staff of the Senate Finance Committee, by what a cabinet member or administration official says, or just as clearly by what they don't say. And so the screaming headline of both threat assessment hearings 2 days in a row should be Trump's Director of National Intelligence and Trump's CIA Director do not say Iran was an imminent threat. That's it. That's what has happened in these hearings 2 days in a row. They could easily have said it, and they don't say it.
Why can't the U.S. just immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, we could, but it takes 2 to tango. We have to get people to
take their $1 billion ship and drive it up.
No, that's not it. You cannot open the Straits of Hormuz, and you have not, Donald Trump. Donald Trump does not have the military power to do that, and Tulsi Gabbard said that today. She said Donald Trump is lying when he says they could just immediately open the Strait of Hormuz. Tulsi Gabbard today said Iran still has the means to threaten passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Congressman Jimmy Gomez ended up asking Trump's Director of National Intelligence and CIA Director why they even have a job.
If the president can determine and ignore what you're doing, why do you guys even have a job? Why do you even advise them? So you're saying tomorrow the president of the United States can say China is an imminent threat, and then he can take his own, no matter what the intelligence says, he can take his own action. So that's what you're basically saying. Okay, let's go on. Director Gabbard, you said that North Korea has intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the homeland. Yet, the Defense Department said that Iran was at least 10 years away from achieving an intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach the homeland. Which one is a more serious threat, North Korea or Iran?
These threats are taken within the context of the total body of intelligence reporting.
So that's, it should be, and that's my point. It's not just about having the capability of building a weapon. It's if they can actually deliver that weapon, if they can, they have the intention of doing that. How many weeks away are they? We haven't heard that there were weeks away. We haven't heard that there were months away. But that's what we're waiting for. Imminent, to me, means is that they're mobilizing troops. They're moving things into position, artillery. They're getting ready to attack. But everything that we've heard is that this is not the case.
Gentleman's time has expired.
We have just learned that Tulsi Gabbard is resigning as the Director of National Intelligence. MS Now's Jake Traylor is following this for us from the White House. What can you tell us, Jake?
Yeah, Chris, this is something we learned of moments ago, according to a senior White House official as well as a senior administration official talking to MS Now, telling us that Tulsi Gabbard has resigned from her position as the director of the office, the Director of National Intelligence. That is per a White House official and a senior administration official. One White House official telling MS Now the reasoning for that resignation is coming due to Gabbard's attempt to support her husband as he battles a rare form of bone cancer. We are working to learn the details of that resignation, the timing of that as well. I will note, though, just for a little bit of context there, Chris, is there's been a lot of speculation around Gabbard's involvement in the administration, particularly around President Trump and the White House's involvement in foreign relations in Venezuela, particularly in Iran, as this war has raged on for months now. Gabbard initially was a long-standing critic of any type of regime change wars globally. Her initial candidacy and then initial endorsement of President Trump back in 2024 was centered around her continually saying President Trump will not lead us into new wars. And so there's been a lot of questioning and reporting around Gabbard's involvement in this administration as it has continued and pursued war with Iran over the past couple of months. But as of now, we know that her resignation has been sent to the president's desk, that he has been made aware of it. And these two administration officials are saying that this will come imminently. We're still working to learn some of the details of this resignation, some of the behind-the-scenes matter, which we'll bring to you as soon as we get there, Chris.
Jake, thanks so much for that. And certainly we wish all the best to Tulsi Gabbard's husband as he fights a battle against, as she put it, an extremely rare form of bone cancer. But Brendan Boyle, if I can come back to you on this, obviously the president's intelligence team has been under fire recently. That includes, I think, first and foremost, Kash Patel and the FBI. The members of the intelligence team we haven't talked about are the CIA director, the NSA director, but I wonder what your reaction is to a member of his intelligence team stepping down.
Yeah, well, first, Chris, I share the sympathies you expressed to Tulsi Gabbard's husband having this apparently very rare form of cancer. So I wish them both the best in terms of this health matter. I served with Tulsi Gabbard in the House of Representatives for several terms. Although the member I served with in the House of Representatives is almost a different person from the person who would ultimately join and endorse President Trump and join his cabinet. The thing that I remember even having personal conversations with her way back in 2016 when she was a co-chair of the Bernie Sanders for President campaign, and she was attempting to get me to support Bernie Sanders. And what I remember from this conversation is she was passionately against Hillary Clinton because, and these were exact words, she was saying, quoting her, "I can't support Hillary Clinton because she will cause a war with Iran. And if there's one thing I'm committed to, it's ensuring this country does not go to war with Iran." Those were her exact words to me in the members' cloakroom some years ago. And now here we are. She is actually serving in the cabinet of the president who did launch a war in Iran, a completely unnecessary war of choice. It's unfortunate that she never stood up and actually resigned as a matter of principle. So we shall see who replaces her. Given the track record of this administration, I can't imagine it will be someone who will in any way be willing to stand up to this president on any matter.
Yeah, I was actually covering Bernie Sanders' campaign, and many a time she got in front of the microphone before he came to the podium and said exactly what she told you. I wonder, as we look at these times, and obviously the conversations about the war recently have always centered around the impact that it's had on the economy. And we talked about that poll. Confidence in the economy among Republicans has dropped to its lowest point of Trump's second term, but confidence in Democrats is dropping too. Can either party get back the confidence of the American people?
Well, for the first time, I believe in 15 years, we've seen more Americans now trust Democrats on the economy than Republicans. That said, I'm pretty realistic about the challenge that we as Democrats face as a party. But I think now we have the best opportunity that we've had maybe in a decade and a half to finally talk to and address the economic concerns of the American people. I think in these upcoming elections, we as Democrats need to do what this president is not doing, and that is focus like a laser beam on the poor economic condition facing most American families and present a real agenda on what we will do to address it. While this president's worried about billion-dollar ballrooms and slush funds for criminals, we Democrats are actually talking about high gas prices, high health care premiums, high food costs, and what we can do to finally bring down costs for the American people.
Congressman Brendan Boyle, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time and responding to the breaking news with us. Have a happy Memorial Day with you and your family. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. You too.